Hello everyone, I'm Neelam Singh, Practice Director at Quadrant Knowledge Solutions. Welcome to the Tech Talk. In this show, we invite industry experts and technology professionals for addressing bigger questions on the emerging technology trends, predictions, identifying best practices, and deliberating on challenges and opportunities in today's fast-changing technology world. Today, we have with us Mr. Balaji Raghunathan, Vice President, Technology and Solutions Digital Experience at ITC Infotech, who will share his thoughts on key priorities for CIOs and digital leaders in 2023 and beyond. Welcome to our show, Balaji.
Yeah, thank you, Neelam.
So, Balaji, this is a very exciting time of the year and the century, I must say, post the COVID era, many changes in the business strategies, unexpected disruptions happening. We would talk about all this throughout our session, but let's start with my first question. Would you like to highlight some major game-changing technology trends that will have biggest impact in our business world, 2023 and beyond?
Yeah, sure. So if you look at what happened last year, right, everybody went online. But now if we look at where we are heading, we are looking at a convergence of the physical world with the virtual world, right? So that's where the metaverse is coming in a big way. Of course, like people are still looking at it only from a POC perspective, and there are some use cases like digital twins, as well as educational and some kind of marketing areas where it is actually looking relevant. But yeah, I think from an adoption perspective, I think there's still some room to go there. But essentially, that's a combination of VR and basically blockchain and AI, right? And also with 5G coming in, you will see a lot of this convergence leading to more and more new use cases. So that's actually accelerating this convergence of physical and digital. Now the physical, digital, and you can even call it as a virtual convergence, right? So that's one thing. Now, if we look at the next set of areas where technology is actually transforming business, it is more and more maturity of AI. We saw about Chat GPT, although it's it's not fully equal to a human, but I think the advancement what you see over the standard chatbots is just vast, right? So that's basically generative AI. So you are going to see more and more advanced AI. And these AI is also going to get embedded into business processes. People are looking at data-driven decision making, embedding AI, ML as part of the automation process. So essentially, what we are looking at in the second area is the embedding of AI into the business processes of the enterprise areas, right? Focus areas. Now, the third thing, of course, is like automation. AI, ML are already contributing to automation, but we are looking at a lot of things which were being manually done, get into the automation world. So there is a lot of this intelligent document processing. A lot of areas, involved manual paper-based processes. All those are getting digitized in an accelerated way using intelligent document processing. And for that, basically, what is contributing is the advancement of machine learning. And you also have all these cloud providers come with out of the box kind of services for speech, for vision, for all this natural language processing. So all these are also impacting from a technology perspective. Of course, the final frontier is more in the areas of security and privacy protection. So that's where we are looking at a lot of digital trust, digital risk kind of advancements happening. So to summarize, it's from a trend perspective, it's the convergence of the physical world and the virtual world and the digital world, if you want to call it. The second thing is essentially, embedding of this AI into business processes. The third one, of course, is more in the area of digital trust.
Very insightful, Balaji. And given all these, how do you think the role of digital leaders and CIOs are changing, especially after the pandemic? What would their focus and priorities be, given that these are the trends now shaping up?
Yeah, so if you look at what happened, post-COVID, you had this whole idea of, how do you build resiliency into the organization? How do you build flexibility into the organization? How do you build agility into the organization? So basically, you have to detect fast, you have to respond fast. So that's where the business gets its value, and that's where an understanding of technology and what technology can do to the business use cases actually comes into picture. So that's where the role of the digital leaders and the CIOs are getting more and more important. A lot of them are getting into board seats, which was not heard of earlier. Then the second area is essentially like earlier the CIO was more focused on more BAU activities, business as usual activities. But they are now getting into a lot of this transformational activities. They need to understand the business of the enterprise, and then look at what the customer wants from them, and then looking at rolling out more and more new initiatives faster, basically. So that's where the CIO and the digital leaders are coming into picture. They are becoming more and more important. Of course, like in many of the areas, there is not a clear demarcation. Many of the enterprises, there is still not a clear demarcation into what a chief digital officer does, chief information officer does, and say what a chief data officer does, right? So there is a lot of I won't say I won't say ambiguity, but still who does what is not clearly defined. There are defined areas where they go after, but essentially in some organizations these are all the same person doing. In some organizations it is of course different people doing, but essentially what this still says is that data, digital technology, all these are most important for today's businesses.
Of course, and I totally agree with you. And given all this, how effectively will digital leaders, I'm sure there is no demarcation as we discussed, but how effectively will they be able to contribute in shape, whosoever is having this role, right? How will be they able to contribute to shaping the digital transformation strategy in their organizations? And how critical will be the change management, if you will?
Yeah, so if we look at today, what is the main asset any enterprise has, right? It's beyond the tangible one. Data is basically the asset what anybody has today
Of course,
from an enterprise perspective, right? So you need to actually, protect the data. You need to monetize the data. I think, and how do you do that? That is through kind of digital applications. So now, for you know, making your customers, making your stakeholders actually engage with you in a digital mode, you need a lot of process in place. You need a lot of operating model in place. You need a lot of literacy in place. So that's where your change management actually involves getting in this data literacy into picture, getting in this digital literacy into picture. Everybody needs to know how to find the data what they need, how to actually access the data what they need, how to process the data what they need, and then generate insights out of that data. So that's what will lead to your data driven organization. So for that, essentially what comes into picture is the digital skilling and the digital literacy and your data literacy. So I think that is how I would say that change management becomes very, very important, both from an adoption perspective and the success of your digital initiatives perspective.
Agreed. Agreed. Now, when we are creating this digital vision for tomorrow, yeah, it is very crucial for any organization to be relevant and sustainable, resilient. These are some of the trending words. Uh, Would you like to share some observations or recommendations that you can give these organizations how to stay relevant and sustainable in today's changing situations?
Yeah, so I think sustainability is a big word, right? I mean, so
Different meanings, different
yeah,
context, yes.
it's based on the industry. What is sustainable actually different,
Yes.
but essentially, I think today, from a sustainability perspective, the first thing is more in terms of how do you report what is your carbon footprint. You know, how do you ensure that, or at least how do you show to the world that you're reusing a lot, you're reducing your consumption, right? So I think that's where data becomes quite a important asset.
Yep.
Now you might need to actually look at whether you're compliant with the regulations required in that particular country. You might need to report to the regulating authorities, and also if you look at how certain funds are actually investing into any organization, sustainability plays a big role. So you have to actually show how green you're in terms of be it the IT or in terms of the finance or even in terms of your own consumption. So I think that is where you have this whole concept of green IT coming in, where you have to actually show how you're using more of renewable energy and power, and how you're reducing your power consumption, how you're actually contributing to reducing the carbon footprint. So essentially, yeah, I mean, green IT, then looking at data, processing this data, reporting this data. I think these are all very, very important from a sustainability perspective. Now, coming to resilience, again, it's a lot of data-driven decision making and analytics. So there is a lot of IoT work going on in terms of tracking. Where is your raw materials, where is your supply chain. So basically people are talking about supply chain control towers, where they get a view of the entire end-to-end life cycle of your from your supply chain, whether your raw materials have arrived, whether your goods have been manufactured, whether they have been delivered. So essentially that whole supply chain tower, that's a very, very important aspect of your resiliency strategy. And now how do you leverage analytics on top of the data you have from a supply chain perspective? All that becomes quite important actually.
Right, and agreed. I come from the supply chain background, so we are doing a lot of research on control towers and how they are being used. We have this concept of digital twin in supply chain also nowadays, just to understand what if scenario is better, because of the changing situations. You don't know
Yeah,
what
you need
goes wrong
to
when.
build analysis also in all these areas. What if your part of your supply chain actually breaks? So what
Breaks,
is your
yeah.
alternative?
Yeah, what all gets impacted is only when you have visibility to these, you can give some
Yeah.
inputs, right? So, and also when it comes to sustainability, beyond being green, I think nowadays organization also sustainability, as you said, has different meanings. I think maybe we can have a next session on that, but sustainability can be, in terms of nowadays you see many layoffs going on. So how people are, getting people on board. So is it sustainable? Business strategies, I mean. Okay. But let's shift a little bit gears. This is for another day's discussion. Let's shift gears a little bit and try to understand the dynamics of workforce now. We have spoken about the business strategies, how the CDOs or CIOs, CTOs need to think. Now let's look at the workforce. For example, diverse workforce is highly customized, intuitive workforce experience is what they want. And all this happened post the COVID era. They're looking for a need to hyper-personalization. According to you, how hyper-personalization will be vital in keeping your talent engaged and getting them upskilled? Because that's what all organizations need at the end of the day, people.
Yeah. So today, as I already told, if you want to actually, stay relevant in your business, in the market, right? Your employees should know how to detect something faster, process it faster, and respond faster, right? So for that, what becomes very important is putting the right person in the right job. And again, for that, you need the right skill for the right person to do the right job faster. So how do you actually provide? How do you skill your employees so that they can actually respond in the right way? So basically, how do you provide the right content, right learning content to the right person as part of his role, at the right time on the device of their choice. So all that actually becomes very, very important today. So that is where, if you look at traditionally what used to happen, people used to go to a training room, right, and go maybe for 2 or 3 days, then learn some new technology or new process, then come back. It may get implemented, it may not get implemented. It all depends on how they actually, learn that particular aspect or that particular framework and then try to apply. But today, what we have is we have this whole concept of learning experience platforms. So this learning experience platforms is something which reside on top of a learning management system. And what they do is they actually tailor content based on your role needs as well as your areas of interest. And what is provided is a kind of bite-sized learning. So you don't need to spend days and days only into training. What you can do is when you have time free, you can actually go consume that particular content. You can take up that particular training. You have the Coursera's of the world, or you have the plural sites or any other online training platforms of this world. So essentially this learning experience platform becomes a very, very important tool for enabling this personalization, or whatever you call as hyper personalization, a role based hyper personalization for your workforce.
So then, we know the workforce or the Gen Zs have a different way of absorbing information. So I think this works best for them.
Yeah.
There's one topic that you touched upon in your initial trends is cybersecurity. Now, this has become a very important topic, right? Do you see an increase in cybersecurity and the risk management challenges in future with this increasing level of digital technology? Because then you are more susceptible to these risks, right? So how do you see that?
Yeah. So if you look at what I already talked about, I talked about your convergence of your physical and your digital world, right? And in the manufacturing world, you're talking about the convergence of IT and OT, right? Your information technology and your operating technology. Then the other areas, what you're looking at is basically your embedding of AI into your business processes. So essentially, how do you augment or even take a decision based on what your AI and ML actually provides as part of their recommendations or their insights. So now what this means is that the enterprise is getting more and more connected to the outside world, and your risk actually increases manifold. So that is where essentially you may have your employee accessing your data through their mobile device, but using a kind of compromised Wi-Fi network. So although the employee may be a trusted employee, you may not be able to give access to that particular employee because that network is a public Wi-Fi and it's sort of compromised, right? So how do you ensure this, success? I mean, how do you protect your asset while enabling real-time access to your employees, but securely? So I think that becomes the overall challenge. And so that's where, from a cybersecurity perspective, this whole concept of zero trust architecture and adaptive access comes into picture. So essentially, from a zero trust perspective, what happens is, like, you don't trust, the user. You don't trust, who is accessing. You don't trust the device. You don't trust, how they came from. So you actually ensure that all that is authenticated, and only then you allow access, to that particular person. And again, that's based on multiple other parameters. Like, for example, it could be location, right? So that's where this whole adaptive and access comes into picture. So if, for example, your employee is within the perimeter of your particular enterprise or in a secure network, you may allow the employee to actually get higher level of access. Whereas if they are in a public network, you may want to actually give them much lower access. So I think that's where this whole concept of adaptive access comes into picture. So essentially, this zero trust security and your adaptive access plays an important role in cyber. Now, the next area, what we are seeing is a lot of AI based capabilities coming also into cyber defense. So, for example, what happens is like most of the enterprises today have the security operating centers, right? So SOCs. So now what happens is like a lot of alerts they keep getting generated, and you need a lot of people to actually even make sense of these alerts. So how do you reduce these alerts? So I think that's one area where AI is getting used. Basically, how do you reduce the false alerts, right? I think that's one area where AI is getting used. You're going to see more and more AI getting embedded in cybersecurity. Then the third aspect from a digital trust perspective is, of course, the quality of data, what you should have, right? I think how do you ensure that you have the right data with the right quality so that your analytics is also right? So I think that's the third area as part of your cyber risk. And the fourth area, of course, is like when you're using your. I mean, I don't want to call it as cyber, but it's basically digital trust. So when you look at it from a digital trust perspective, you have to protect your network, you have to protect your data, you have to protect your device. Then you have to actually protect your, your use cases from going awry. So which means that like if you're using AI for your, use cases, you need to ensure that it is responsible, right? It is basically explainable. You can explain to a regulatory authority how you made a particular decision. If you're, for example, a banking or insurance company, you should be able to tell your regulator why you denied, a particular role or a particular loan or a particular claim to a particular person. And if you're using AI for that, you need to know how that decision was made. So I think that's where this responsible AI comes into picture. To put it into a nutshell, your whole digital trust framework is actually expanding. You have all this cyber security, the zero trust architecture, you have your adaptive access coming into picture, then you have your responsible AI coming into picture, responsible and explainable AI, and then of course, like you have your privacy aspects also into picture. How do you protect data? How do you protect the privacy of your end user? All those comes into picture actually.
That's great, Balaji. And I had a follow-up question also. I'm sure you have answered that. That how do you have these? These are some of the best practices that an organization can build to have a efficient and secure and resilient and sustainable organization. So,
sure.
Thank you so much for this discussion, Balaji. It was very indeed insightful, and we just hope that all organizations follow this, and we just build a strong and resilient systems which are disruptive in our world. So thank you so much for the discussion today. It was a pleasure having you.
Thanks a lot, Neelam. Thank you.